You are responsible to know the paintings that are listed on the study guide. You need to know the artist, title, the date. You will get half credit for the date that you find here. There are also terms that you should know. You will have to either define them or match them. If we did match it, it'll make it complicated. Quantity. Make more of them? I'll think about it. The midterm will be essay based. There'll be 6 images on the board, 2 at a time, for a total of 3 essays. But we will talk about that more. We'll do the review next Tuesday. Yes, next Tuesday there will be a review for midterm. Yes. Usually they're available on campus bookstore or that other place.
The copies in?
Other places that sell textbooks usually sell Lulu. Right?
There's a bookstore at the Bayou Walk.
Okay.
Is there a specific book that you need to buy?
The 8.5 by 11 size. Any other questions about the midterm or anything else before we start? Oh, somebody asked a question about the papers. In the grade, I won't be not grading the papers. There are graders for this class who grade the papers. In their contract, it says they get at least 2 weeks minimum to grade them. That's because this quite typically takes a very long time to grade this number of papers. So please be patient. The grade will be posted on Blackboard in about 2 weeks. Any other questions? Yes. I don't have any more. It's on Blackboard. I passed that last time. Alright, thank you guys. Okay, so last week we were looking at Dutch art, and in particular, this image by Vermeer. What was the first about it? Kind of what? The genre painting, what does that mean? It shows daily life in the Netherlands. This is a very popular form of art in the Netherlands, yes?
Oh, it showcases Vermeer's ambiguity, love for ambiguity.
It showcases Vermeer's love of ambiguity. What does that mean? Where do you see it happening visually?
You don't know if she's looking down or closing her eyes. You don't know if she's an allegory or it's just a genre painting. Oh, yeah.
So you don't know if she's looking down or if she's closing her eyes. It's unclear if it's just a regular thing of everyday life or if it's an allegory.
You can't tell me the motion.
What else is important about this painting? The last judgment painting in the background. What's the notion about that? It makes a reference that can be interpreted allegorically as what? It could be talking about morality, absolutely. Yes?
You have a theme of fair or balanced judgment. On one hand, you have I'm sorry, what?
Speak up.
You have the theme of balanced or fair judgment. On one hand, she has the scales, which she's determining a balance between what's in front of her, and then you have the painting behind her of the Last Judgment, which has a more divine effect.
Yeah, we have the issue. Can you not do that? We have the issue of she's looking at these scales. She's trying to do what with those scales? What's she trying to determine? Yes, they're about the balance, but what specifically? Yeah? Maybe, yeah. There is certainly an allusion to there's something religious in this painting, as well as the real life in the way that Vermeer is painting, and the fact that this is an ordinary woman. Yes, the scale is actually a true scale. It's balanced correctly. So there's a question of sort of being a just judge as well as just judgment. So And what is she literally measuring here? Her jewelry, we see all, no. We have all her sort of pearls and gold and finery, things like that. The Dutch had issues with all of these nice things. What were their issues?
But they didn't go along with them after they died.
Sorry, say that louder.
After they died, they couldn't really take them with them, so.
That wasn't the issue, but yes, they like to point out that after you die, you can't take it with you, yes?
2 points. The Catholic Church has been trying to teach us for decades that whether we go to heaven or hell is based on the balance of our deeds. That has
Yes.
nothing to do with nothing. On the other hand, the church may not have paid for this. I don't know.
The church did not pay for this. No, this is not a religious commission whatsoever.
Also, like find things we cause guilt.
Yes, the guilt. Yes, because we're supposed to be living simply. It's about being spiritual and religious, and it's not about all those fine things in the world. And yet, the Dutch at this time were a very wealthy nation, and a lot of people had these nice things. So there was that. There was the issue of the guilt, the morality tale. You can't take it with you. You understand that? Yeah. Yes, good question. What is the Netherlands as a whole? Is it Catholic or Protestant?
Protestant.
Protestant. Oh. That's tolerant, yes. There's religious freedom, and from here in particular,
He's Catholic.
was Catholic. Yeah. So somebody mentioned the allegory. What does the allegory mean?
Justice.
About justice?
Judgment?
The allegory. How do we know when to say a woman is an allegory of justice?
Scales.
The scales.
Blind.
Yeah, you could use the
So
eyes.
that she'd be blindfolded, or she'd be blind, but here she's like looking down, so it's not like security. What else has been suggested about this woman?
She's
She might be
Dutch.
pregnant.
Now, you convinced us that's Dutch worship.
What's that?
You convinced us that's just proper Dutch fire.
It could be either. It's unclear. It's always ambiguous. It could just be popular that type. Our historians are not sure if this is just the way women wore their dresses, or if she is actually pregnant. Yes. Yes, because of the blue, we might be able to think of her as the Virgin Mary, possibly. These are all sort of hypotheses proposed by our historians to try to kind of crack the code of this painting.
What's with the horse on the bottom that sticks out?
The horse, is that it?
Horse's head.
Yeah, I think that's part of the railing of this table. Not sure. Yeah?
And one other thing I just noticed is like this cover on the side here. Could that be like maybe she covers that up? You know, during the times when she's not really looking at it to sort of be outside of her mind.
Perhaps, yeah. Yeah?
This might be changing, but it's really has the signature for me where we're blocked off from the whole paint.
We're still a little bit blocked off, as we saw in a lot of Ramirez paintings. Sometimes there's chairs in our way, sometimes there's curtains in our way, lots of furniture in our way. And we're also blocked off in another way, is that we can't really read what her psychological state is. There's sort of that sense of interiority that the viewer just will never have access to, what she's actually thinking. It's not about, say, projecting this idea to the viewer. Any other thoughts on this painting? No? We also looked last time at Rembrandt. What was important about this work? Yes?
It was portrait, but it was kind of like regular portrait.
Yeah. So we have this is a group portrait, but unlike boring group portraits, it does not have the figures just sort of laid out so we each see individual faces. Here they're sort of dynamically doing something. And what are they doing? What's that? Parading, yes. It's true that they're getting ready for a parade. Yes?
Oh, they're coming towards the viewer.
They're coming towards the viewer. Yes? They're always on the watch. They're always at the ready. How do we know that? Because they're preparing their guns. Everybody's sort of in a different stage of readying that musket to fire, to the point where what happens? Yes, so we see that the little boy sort of fires the musket and it becomes a plume of smoke. There's a play with the plume of smoke and the plume of his hat.
Now, all I see is the hat bit.
I would say it's more of a visual kind of literal. Or how else does Rembrandt make this a very dynamic group portrait? Yes.
They're all in various stages of firing again.
Well, not firing a gun.
Oh,
but
like-
yeah, we said they're readying that gun in different ways. Yes.
Various points of attentiveness or focus.
Various points of attentiveness or focus. Good. In what way?
Well, everyone's looking in some random direction, not specifically on one point. That could just tangent on the idea of how they're on different points of preparation, but
Yeah, they're all engaged in this activity, different individual activities that all add up to tell us that they are ready to sort of protect the city. Yes.
A lot of them have different stances and different strides.
Yes, different stances and different strides. If you remember earlier the portraits, it would literally be like, or think of a Little League portrait or something like that. It's just everybody in a row. Got to get their faces. Here, Rembrandt's making that so much more dynamic. Yes.
We have the two children running through.
Yes, and we have these two children running through. What's significant about that? Yes. No, he was. And these are all recognizable, specific people, except for these two kids.
Except for who?
The two children.
Oh.
They could be allegories.
They could be allegorical. They help raise the status of this work to perhaps, it's playing with the idea it's a group portrait, it could be a history painting. Yes?
Is it maybe a loss of innocence sort of thing? These men are also ready to load their guns and go to war, and the little boy firing a weapon, and here we see the children running through this and being exposed to this sort of aspect of society?
I would say probably not, but does anybody know why I'm not about a loss of innocence? First off, who commissioned this painting?
Franz Banninghoff.
Franz Banninghoff. This company commissioned this painting. These types of portraits, group portraits were paid for by everyone. Would they have been into this idea of a lost innocence? Probably not. So, and their function. What was the function of companies into this way? No.
Militia.
Militia, yeah.
Could it be that the kids are running around so that it kind of implies we need to see these kids running free on the streets at night?
You could say that. But yeah, this is a militia. This is sort of, these groups had formed, they, overthrown the Spanish, basically. Now they weren't as necessary, so they're participating in parades and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, these types of guys would have been very well respected. It wouldn't have been about a lost mission. So perhaps you could say, okay, we're growing to that these children can run free. But I think on the other hand that these figures are really just in there to be sort of that added dimension of maybe it's a history painting, elevating the painting further. And what's significant about the little girl? Holding that chicken? Yes, which is part with a reference to the specific companies, both the guns that they use and the coat of arms and things like that. So it makes reference to the specific company. Oops. Let's move on. So we didn't quite finish with Rembrandt. Rembrandt was famous, you may know, for doing like dozens and dozens of self-portraits over the course of his life. So we very much know what Rembrandt looks like at all stages of his life. This one is from 1640. He has an arm on the leg. So he's shown it. We've seen a lot of Yes, he's showing us that he's skilled enough to make it look like he actually is resting his arm on a leg. So we have that added realism. Even though Rembrandt is sort of very kind of painterly painted, where we can see brushstrokes and see all of these things, and we know that it's on some level obviously made with paint, he is still sort of convincing us of the visual aspect of the reality of this scene, because it very much does look like he has his arm resting on a leg. What else is he telling us? He's not just a tradesman, absolutely. This is not just, painting is not just a mechanical means. What is painting, according to Rembrandt? Who does painting? Artists, people with skill, people who dress well, the wealthy, because art should be, again, something elevated, something that is not just a craft-based thing. Yeah.
So basically, by looking like this, he's basically saying, you just can't pick up some guy on the street, he can paint something, and artists, and you always have that.
Sure, that art takes your whole entire life to learn, that there's an element of genius and creativity in it, that it's not just like, I give you a bucket of paint and you painted that room, right? It's not just like house painters. Remember, painters are still having this status issue of it being treated as sort of just a mechanical craft. And they wanted it to be, of course, elevated as something that was about genius, that was something, maybe what we think of artists today is what they were aiming for. And so a lot of times you don't see them in a painter's smock. You don't see them getting their hands dirty. We see Rembrandt as a gentleman, well-to-do. He's showing off his skill. He's showing off his technique, all of these things. But he's not showing you how he actually sort of paints. Remember, we have a lot of painters who show you painting, but they're wearing really nice stuff you would never want to get near the studio. Here, on the other hand, Rembrandt is now, 20 years older. This is more toward the end of his life. Now, what's Rembrandt telling us? That he's a painter. Yeah, he's owning that, right? What do you think accounts for this change?
When we get older, we quit trying to impress.
Okay, yeah, when we get older, we may quit trying to impress people. Maybe we don't have to impress people anymore. We've made it, right? What's he telling us about painting? Yeah?
At this point in time, has society kind of come to accept the painter as less of a craftsman and more of an artist?
Well, craftsman and artisan would almost kind of be the same thing.
Less of a craftsman.
It was on the rise. Yeah, remember all of these painters that we've been looking at as sort of have this issue. Velázquez had it, Rembrandt had it. But it's, yeah, I don't know if things are necessarily shifting, but I think Rembrandt has lost interest in putting on those kinds of airs anymore. Yes?
I think it's just so scared I'm so good, I don't need to show off.
Yeah, I'm so good I don't need to show off, definitely. And he's giving us something very, so he's giving us his brushes, he's giving us sort of a palette. He shows himself to be very old. It's not sort of a flattering portrait. Whenever you think about portraits, usually you might think about flattery. When Velázquez is doing King Philip, the portrait is always involved in some level of flattery because that's your subject who's paying for it, commission, etc. Here, Rembrandt is showing himself to be old. We see the wrinkles on his face. He has a much looser style. Was there a hand in the front?
No, that was
Two hands in the front. Yes?
looser stuff.
What?
Looser.
Yes, much looser style. Also, Rembrandt was going blind toward the end of his life,
Oh.
which may account for it as well. But artist styles do change, absolutely. That he's less about sort of trying to contain that brushwork and more just, letting it all hang out. I don't know if we can say it's still increased, or I don't know, what do you guys think?
I
I
disagree.
don't know. I think it's a different phase. It's an aged phase, obviously. I think they're both sort of flirting with this level of realism. What we can definitively say is that the brushstrokes are looser, that things have gotten a lot more sketchy down here especially. That he's not as concerned here with giving us every last detail of the fabric and things like that. Certainly not at all like the style of Vermeer, who would give us every last detail. Whether it's better or worse is your own opinion. But he is showing us also this interesting element of the maul stick, which is something that Rembrandt would not use at this point, but it was a tool that artists used to rest their hands on to make the hand level. And so it's interesting that he's sort of going back to this, something that a beginner would basically be using and not a master, essentially. So it's an interesting sort of perception of the art itself as an older man.
Well, perhaps as opposed to going back to, like, degenerating back to that of a beginner, maybe it's because as he ages, his endurance goes down, and so he needs rest more often than that's full.
Sure. I mean, yeah, we can think of lots of theories of why he might want to include that. Yeah.
Well, the way I look at it, it's almost as a kind of delegating. On the negative side, you can say he got so old that he can't level his hand on his own, so he uses that. On the other, you can also say that even as a master, I don't forsake the fundamentals.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really interesting interpretation. There could be an actual physical need for it because older people can't have the same control that he once had. On the other hand, it could just say, as a master, you still can't forsake the fundamentals. It could be a lesson. But I'm not sure we'll ever really have a definitive answer. Part of the joys of art history, but we can speculate about why Rembrandt would do that, about why, as an older man, he's not as concerned with all of that finery and putting on airs and elevating up painting and elevating his own status as he once was. So today we're moving back to France. Our geography, we're going over Europe. Remember when we last left France, we were talking about Louis XIV. Who remember it started the French Academy, which was basically a state-run school to train artists. And this was the first sort of state-run school like this, because previously artists had been trained. They'd be sent to guilds, they'd be working in a master's home, they'd be apprenticed at a young age, etc. So now artists could go to art school, hooray, which some of you may be in right now. So this is Louis XIV was, in addition to all of the other things, a big patron of the arts. And it was Charles Lebrun who was the first sort of headmaster of the Academy. And remember, Charles Lebrun's big thing was that he really wanted painting to be able to illustrate things that were happening on the level of facial expression. He wanted everything to be legible, which is, great. But on the other hand, it was not really suited when he's giving lectures about sort of how to express things legibly so that people can read them. He wasn't very much thinking about how that plays out on these bigger historical type canvases that he is going to be doing for Louis XIV. So we have kind of this mishmash of things going on that, if you got up close, would perhaps be all very legible, but because of the nature of these types of commissions, they were just illegible, essentially. And Charles Lebrun was a great admirer of Poussin, who was another French artist, who was working primarily in Italy, and it was a proponent of this idea of classicism, which was a return sort of back to these older classical themes, nicely arranged landscape, we'll get to it, sort of orderly and balanced and even light, and none of that drama and craziness of Caravaggio or Rubens. So that's sort of where who Lebrun was influenced by and what was sort of being taught at the French Academy. So, remember we were at Versailles. What sort of things happened at Versailles? Parties.
Every day.
Balls.
Plays.
What's that?
Like they would watch the theater or something.
Theater, opera, definitely.
Decadence.
Decadence, yes. Excess. Yes, all of these things are happening on Versailles. It was a site of complete and utter opulence. And where was Versailles? What's that?
Outside of Paris.
Outside of Paris. Just outside of Paris. It's about a 20-minute train ride outside of Paris. So what happens is that Louis XIV dies, and the regency that is in place until the 15th can take the throne because he's too young. He decides we're moving the car back to Paris. Like, we're done with this whole Versailles business, and we're going back to Paris. And this is sort of where we get the beginning of Rococo style, because the nobles are quite happy to get, to be done with Versailles. It wasn't that they were happy to be done with endless parties; they were still obviously going to continue that. But now they were having them sort of in more localized sites. They were having them in these nice mansions in Paris. Instead of everybody living together at Versailles. So we see sort of the nobility kind of free to roam now in Paris. It's a more, it's less provincial than what's going on in Versailles. In Versailles, you're isolated. In Paris, you have the whole city at your disposal. And these nobles would often host these things called salons. Now remember, salons really means room. But they would host salons where they would invite people to come to their homes, and it was quite an art to sort of pick notable people. You have a scientist, you have an artist, you have a poet, you have a writer, and throw these people together at a dinner party and whatnot, and sort of see how the conversation goes. And what things were that were really valued were sort of being witty, the repartee between people, being quick on your feet. Basically, the perfection of cocktail party talk. Being very engaging, showing how smart you were, and things like that. So lots of women would sort of host these salons, and they would have them in rooms such as this one, which you can see when we think about the Hall of Mirrors. Remember Louis XIV's Hall of Mirrors, we can sort of see how that style is now being adapted to the smaller kind of drawing room of the French nobility. This one is Salon de la Princesse. Where we see, well, what can we see in this? It's
Gold.
Gold, yeah. We have lots of gold, lots of opulent materials. What's that? Very ornate, very intricate. What's that? Yes, we have paintings mixed with decoration, mixed with sculpture, mixed with chandeliers. Some people sort of thought these rooms are sort of a total kind of work of art in and of themselves. That we have all of these different mediums being used to achieve sort of one overall effect of essentially opulence. Lots of curvy lines, lots of fancy furniture, things like that. This one is an example in Germany. Same idea. We have lots of decoration. Not a lot of history painting. So that's sort of the direction that we're going in. Is sort of away from these big ideas of history painting and towards smaller scale painting that is done for a private home, not for a castle, essentially, not for a church. So we can compare sort of the previous style, here we have Louis XIV, with this new birth of Rococo, which is exemplified perhaps by the painter of Watteau. These are two images of people, obviously. Watteau's is called L'Environ, a different one. How can you compare these two? A portrait of a king, an anonymous person.
Regal attire of wings.
Yes, definitely. We have the king, perhaps physical body, is almost dwarfed by all his regal attire, his flamboyance. You think they're strikingly similar? Yes, well, I wouldn't call it quite common, but take a member of the nobility compared to a king, similar? Yeah?
No, they're right. I think we're wearing gold flannel.
Not flannel, but maybe tight?
No,
Gold.
It's gold tight. It's glittery, definitely, satiny. Yeah?
Is it fault time, or is it really the color scheme has always been this way?
What about the color scheme?
It's
Oh, it's
very-
unclear. I think it's unclear if that's supposed to be like a golden light or actually
Yeah.
golden tights. Yes?
It's the opulence is just on a smaller scale in the second painting. Even when you can compare the really rich background of Louis XIV with the naturalist perspective in the background.
Uh-huh. So they're both opulent, right? But there's all of this other stuff sort of going into working to frame Louis XIV, telling us exactly who he is. Here we don't have any of that information. We have sort of the hint of a tree, which sort of maybe tells us this scene is taking place outside. Did you have your hand up?
The one on the right, there's like a more facial precision, color.
Definitely, yeah. We don't have, I mean, he almost looks like his mouth is open, he may be speaking, that it's much more casual in that sense, that he's sort of gliding towards us. Yes?
The one on the right, the commission.
Unclear. Maybe? Yeah?
It's almost like it's posing to show the clothes make them.
Okay, so the clothes, it's certainly true that we don't know who this person is. So we have the clues of just the clothing, and so yes, in the question of his commission, it may or may not be a portrait, but we don't know, we don't have all of this extra stuff. Everything in My Century Joe's portrait is telling us, this is the portrait of the King of France. There's no way that that couldn't escape a viewer, because we would see the crown, we would see the scepter, we would see the fleur-de-lis. It's all the majesty of the, we see the throne, we see all of these things. It has to be a King of France. With the Indifference, if we just have this sort of flashy clothes, we have that casual demeanor, but nothing else to go on. So we don't know if it's a specific portrait or not. But this is sort of the shift. This sort of exemplifies that shift from kind of portrait painting, important historical figures, to Rococo painting, where we just see sort of noble, obvious time. We don't know, he's sort of, it's much more casually done, looser brush strokes, not, at least it's unclear if it's a specific person or not, we have not been able to identify him. So you just don't really know. Very sort of different, and this mirrors the difference that was going on in the art schools. Lebrun was very influenced, as I mentioned, by Poussin, this idea of classicism, interest in line and form, and then there was this whole other school of thought that was influenced by Rubens, thinking that it was much more about color and light and passion and the overall kind of bodies and things like this. So this was sort of split. We had the Poussiniste, I think I mentioned this 2 weeks ago, and the Rubenists. If you were a Poussiniste, you were into classicism. You thought that drawing was the foundation of painting. If you were into Rubens, you thought that it was more about convincing people through color and dynamic compositions, things like that. So we have sort of the visual interest of sort of what's going on versus sort of what's being taught in the art school by Lebrun, ordering nature, even lighting, and what the themes of these classical paintings were supposed to be rather enlightening. It wasn't going to be like a random noble prancing around, because that's not a big, important theme. So Watteau, which side did Watteau choose? Watteau sort of falls more on the Rubens side of things. He actually lived in the castle of Luxembourg, where Rubens' 24 paintings of Mary de Medici's life were hanging, and he studied from them. And he paints this while he's sort of in residence at the castle. It's a mythological scene. We have Jupiter and Antiope, and we see that Jupiter is sort of revealing, pulling back this cloth to reveal to himself and to the viewer, of course, the nymph Antiope's sort of beautiful body. So the higher theme of this painting is not much. Naked women, right? Beauty. And we have, of course, a kind of dynamic interplay between sort of Jupiter's darker body, sort of hidden in the shadows, and the lighting kind of falling on Antiope's body, who's sleeping, sort of a favorite theme in art, sort of a sleeping, unaware woman where the male viewer can sort of rest his eyes on this lovely nakedness without having to deal with sort of the return of the woman's gaze. So these are sort of the types of paintings that the nobility would have liked. These are not major, big history paintings. Things like this. So Watteau was actually was still trained in the French Academy. He won the Prix de Rome, which was the Rome Prize, which was given to the best graduating artists, essentially, to go and study in Rome, because France recognized that the visual culture of Rome had much to teach artists. So Watteau didn't exactly go to Rome. He instead goes off to different castles and resides in residence there. But when you come back from Rome, you owe the Academy a painting. And this is the painting that he gives them 6 months late, but he did it. And it is a large painting, and it's Pilgrimage to the Island of Cythera. So this is not, remember the Academy has different hierarchies of types of paintings, and this one does not fit in any of those categories. It's not a history painting, right? Is it a history painting?
No.
No, how do we know it's not a history painting?
You don't know this current day clothing.
Yeah, there's nothing historical that we can find that's going on. It's not, let's see, what else is not? It's not a still life, obviously.
A genre.
It's not exactly a genre painting, why not?
It's because it's...
It's very ethereal, lots of aspects of it are made up. We see cupids over here. And anyways, Watteau was supposed to paint sort of in one of these set categories. But everyone loved this painting so much, they created a whole new category for it, which is the fête galante, which I think I wrote here, fête galante is how you spell it, which basically means sort of a gallant or amorous party. And they wanted, this type of painting was so popular at this time that they created this whole new category for what it could be. It's not a history painting, it doesn't show significant narrative action, it doesn't have historical figures, it's not a genre scene because it's not exactly daily life. But anyways, we'll go into this. So this is sort of what Watteau gives us, and people really admire this painting. But what it is a scene of is sort of an imagined scene that this island of Cythera is a place of sort of, a love island, basically, where people were either sort of going, it's unclear if they're going or coming back from, but people think they're sort of leaving the island of Cythera to return home. And here we see sort of the wistful glances of people. But what we're looking at here on the left, how do we know it's not an imagined scene? Is we have, yeah?
It's almost like it's not as cute and clever as anything else. It's made to look kind of unreal.
Yeah, it's made to look sort of unreal. We have these sort of angels or cupids running around. Here they're sort of helping things. We have a sort of group of amorous lovers. Of course, we see our dog. Again, usually meaning fidelity. It can also mean other things. We have sort of lovers getting ready to go. On the other side, you can see there's a statue of Venus, also alluding to themes of love. And basically, the whole thing is supposed to add up to, this party that these nobles have gone on to this mythical island, had a lovely day there, and now they're sort of returning home, sad to leave, sort of looks behind them, and all of these sort of parents kind of trump off to get back into their boat to leave. But this did not really happen. There is no actual island of Cythera. So what Watteau is really giving us is sort of this imagined fantasy of how the nobles sort of saw themselves. And they did, of course, do big, crazy parties with big themes and things like that, because they didn't work, as I mentioned when we were talking about Versailles. They didn't have jobs, and they also didn't, they couldn't jet set around the world because there were no airplanes and things like that. They didn't have television, they didn't have movies. They didn't have a lot of stuff to do to amuse themselves, except to sort of read, write, and have parties. So they did plan these sort of elaborate excursions, but this is still sort of a mythical imagining of that type of thing because there is no specific island of Cythera that you could physically go to. So this type of painting very much appealed to that nobility. They're like, oh, it's a picture of something I would like to do. And that's in part why Watteau was so popular in his time. He also did this painting, the signboard for Gussaint, which was basically showing how art, it's essentially a painting of a gallery, showing how art was chosen by the nobility, because remember, this is who has the money to buy paintings. That would be the people with the money, the nobility in France. And he's literally sort of giving us sort of a selection of what you could purchase. On the left side, we see, does anyone recognize this guy? It's Louis XIV. Louis XIV's portrait is being put in a crate. This may allude to the fact that he had died 6 years earlier. We have other sort of images that tell us about the passage of time, and that might add up to make this about a vanitas type of theme, a moral message. We have sort of the straw, which was thought to be sort of fragile, and the mirror, obviously, which is also fragile. We have the clock. Whenever we see the clock, we think about the passage of time. Atop the clock, or sorry, below the clock, we have these two lovers. Yes?
For the straw or the hay or whatever, wouldn't that have been used for packing?
Yes, it's doubling. Just like we saw in all of these Dutch genre scenes, things are kind of doubled up. So it would probably be used for packing, but then it's also telling us about fragility of things. We have the clock that passes the time, which of course can be used to tell time. Thank you. Yeah. And we have sort of lovers underneath. So we have sort of a mix of how the nobility is kind of interacting with each other. This man sort of extends his hand to this woman, but she's so engrossed in kind of watching how the packers, the art handlers, are packing this crate. She doesn't even sort of pay attention to her lover's hand. She's instead looking more to what the process is of purchasing these works and things like that. On the other side, we see a woman shopping. This is sort of about shopping. This is for an art gallery. And we see a woman kind of gazing into a mirror. When we see a woman gazing into a mirror, we should think about issues of vanitas. Again, vanity, things like beauty, which are fleeting. And we also see these two men also looking into the mirror. We have this other man sort of looking at admiring paintings, things that are not fleeting. So we have this sort of mix, creating like what the art world kind of looked like in 1721, painted for the specific gallery you're saying. And it was such a popular painting, it was actually sold in 15 days. So it didn't even get kept in the shop. That Watteau specifically painted it for this guy. Watteau died, the guy sold it. You'll also notice that there's a line going through this painting. That's because it was actually divided into two paintings at one point, and it's only recently in the 20th century they put the two halves back together. So basically, this is sort of the daily life of the nobility. They buy things, they party, they look at themselves in mirrors, things like that. Also, we have, once Watteau died of tuberculosis before he was 40. Other artists sort of rose to prominence in the Watteau style, in this sort of Rococo style. This one is Boucher. He was also very popular, and the portrait that he's doing is Mademoiselle de Pompadour, who is Louis XV's official mistress. So there was, anyway, the king had official mistresses in addition to their wives, and Mademoiselle de Pompadour was Louis XV's mistress for about 20 years, which sort of attests to not only her beauty, but probably her wit and being an interesting person. So here she's alluding to a lot of things in this portrait. What is she trying to tell She's what?
Approachable.
Approachable? Okay.
Hot and inviting.
Hot and inviting. I could say that. She was supposed to be very beautiful.
She's probably pretty smart, because she's got 3 books there.
She has her elbow leaning up against all these other books. She's really trying to tell you that she's also very smart. So, which is kind of unusual when we see sort of portraits of women. We don't see this focus, even with portraits of men, we don't always see this focus on like, hang on a second, I'm reading, I'm very smart. Yes?
She's more to do with the outside of the natural world as opposed to being concealed inside a normal building.
Absolutely, yes. So we see her in the natural world, outside. She's not confined to those interiors as all those Dutch women were. Here we see her sort of relaxing in nature. And in fact, she's relaxing in nature. She's been reading this book, but she's sort of not reading it right at this moment that this portrait is supposedly depicting. Instead, what she's doing is she's actually sort of listening to the birds. So she's sort of balancing what you can sort of learn from a book with this interaction in the natural world, in the natural environment, showing that she's sort of part of both worlds, the natural world, outdoors, enjoying sort of that aspect of life, while she also enjoys the learned aspect of life. As she also shows that she's very lovely and beautiful as well. So it's a portrait that is very much sort of giving us this rounder, a more full picture perhaps of how Mademoiselle de Pompadour wanted herself seen. So this is also Boucher. Also again, back to these sort of themes that the nobles liked in addition to portraits of themselves. This one is called Cupid a Captive, where we see Cupid in the middle being teased by these other nymphs. Who this one is sort of raising. She's got his arrows, which he kind of wants back, but she's teasing him. She's not necessarily going to give it back. And we see sort of a lot of kind of erotic or veiled eroticism about this painting, as we saw with Watteau, with Jupiter and Antioch, also about eroticism. Remember when we were looking at the island of Cythera, it's also about love and flirtation and all of these things. So we have a dynamic composition kind of along the lines of Rubens. It's more about color than it is about line or form or the organization of the elements. It's about sort of making it dynamic, making it visually interesting. And then of course we have, all of this lovely nakedness, which would also be very appealing to the nobility to hang in their private homes. So we have a complete shift from these big history paintings, which would have been commissioned by kings and the church and things like that, to themes that are just about kind of having fun, thinking about love, thinking about sex, things like that. This one by Fragonard, also in this group with Boucher, is also on these themes. We have a young woman in a swing. What do we know about this young woman?
She's having fun.
What's that? Wealthy, yes. We have lots of nice clothes going on. And can anyone tell what's going on in this painting?
There's a guy in the bushes looking up her skirt.
Yes, she is, the swing is sort of lifting her skirt, her leg is lifting her skirt, and we have this man here who is her lover, who gets the benefit of this lovely view. As we see, sort of, he's directly along the line emphasized by his outstretched arm, and he's almost sort of putting out his hat, either, to block the view or to enjoy the view further. Yes.
There's another man in the background.
Yes, and there's another man in the background. And he is the one who's sort of controlling the swing. Can you guys see sort of he has sort of the reins of this swing. So this is almost an image of a man getting cuckolded, getting cheated on, by this younger man, this guy, the older man who's actually a bishop. And that was in the commission. The commission was basically for the guy, this guy obviously would be the one who commissioned it, that he wanted an older bishop to be in the background controlling the swing. So this is very much about this guy who has no clue what's going on in front of the painting. He can't see. He thinks he's enjoying his this wealthy, beautiful girl. On the other hand, this other man is reaping all of the benefits of the hard work of this guy who's exerting himself by pushing his swing. So it's a very sort of interesting portrait of a woman kind of caught between these two men. It's very sort of seductive because we know exactly like what that guy is looking at. This guy, of course. And it's kind of hard to see, but her shoe, she sort of kicked her shoe off in kind of delight, and her friends also theorize perhaps a reference to some sort of, kind of orgasmic moment that she's having. So there's very much this kind of connection between her kicking, all of the actions. There's the action on the part of the older bishop, who has no idea what's going on. The action of the woman, who in this moment has picked up her leg, and the shoe which comes off, while the man below her, of course, is hiding in the garden, seeing this view, enjoying the fact that this man in front has no idea what's going on. On the other side of this painting, you see Cupid, a statue of Cupid. Does anyone know what he's doing?
He's fucking as well.
Yeah, he's putting up his finger to his lips like he won't, that we're going to keep this secret. So this is not a condemnation of something bad, but kind of enjoying all the sexual dynamics that are going on in this painting. And Cupid, of course, tells us that this is, of course, a love story, and we're going to be quiet, and we're going to keep this secret. We can also think about the environment that we're in. We're in a natural environment, as we saw with Mademoiselle de Pompadour, but it's also most likely a garden. You can see sort of the fence back here, which tells us that while in a natural environment, it's also a tamed environment. It's sort of a safe environment, and that's another sort of part of the nobility, is that they're having these elaborate parties and all of these things, but there's always sort of still rules. It's still enclosed. You are still not allowed to get a job and things like that. Not that this is anything to do with getting a job, but it's very much about kind of the diversions of the aristocracy and how they're spending their time and the delight of kind of being caught in these situations. So it's a very flirtatious painting, one that would have been, shown as such. There's no higher theme. There's no moral message. So as we saw in a lot of the Dutch paintings, sometimes we're looking at everyday life and it's a moral theme. Sometimes we're just looking at everyday life. So we're so far away from that history painting that was valued by the Academy and that was valued by kings and the church and things like that. Yeah. What is this? Good question. They wouldn't have been doing things like this.
They're a major culture. I'm sure they just were too far away.
It didn't really matter. Also, we're at the time at 500, we're like 100 years away.
Oh, they went to this point.
Or not the, well, what we're doing in this class is sort of looking at each culture when they are like having that painting. So the Dutch, were really going forward in the 16th century, or sorry, the 17th century. Now we're in the 18th century. We're back yeah, but no, I don't imagine that the Dutch would have liked this kind of painting. First of all, they didn't have an aristocracy. It wasn't about flaunting your wealth and being opulent and ridiculous and things like that. The French had they didn't have a moral compunction about that. They were fine with it. And this was the type of painting that was very much celebrated. Yes?
Are those children beneath her or what?
These are statues.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's sort of what a noble would have in their garden. So we see, I think this one has wings. They're either little angels or cherubs. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so also another Fragonard. Like I said, this painting is very popular. That one, the swing had a particular commission, so we know a lot about it. This one is called The Meeting. Again, what's going on here? Can anyone tell? A rendezvous, yes. So we have this woman. She's sort of, again, you can tell that she's wealthy, well-to-do. She's wearing very nice clothes. She's, again, in a garden. We know because we don't have random statues of Venus and Cupid out in the wilderness. And we see her lover has sort of come over this wall. He's here, but she's still sort of looking, she's a little bit scared. That's how we know that this might be an illicit rendezvous. We don't know, exactly what she's scared of. She's looking away. Perhaps she but it wasn't his true painting either. We get sort of a little pushback in England. This is an English painting, Willem Hogarth. He did this series called Marriage à la Mode, basically means marriage today, contemporary marriage. And what he's giving us in scenes like this is showing us sort of the crappy side of all of this. So what we get is, this is the first scene in a series of 6 paintings that Hogarth made, kind of satirizing the lives of these foolish nobles, where what's going on is this young couple is about to be married, or is currently being married. This is the marriage contract where we sign it all away. And these are their 2 fathers. So what's going on if we look on the left side? Is this a couple that's in love with each other?
No.
No, definitely not, we could say. The man is in love with his reflection. And the woman has her wedding ring actually in the middle of this kerchief, as if she's sort of drawing her tears because she's sort of upset about this marriage, this impending marriage. Meanwhile, her legal advisor is kind of looking over her. Maybe there's a relationship there going on. It's unclear. We have the 2 dogs. What can we extrapolate from the 2 dogs?
Oh.
Well, that's what you got.
Yeah, they're...
This dog has no body. Why didn't she want to marry?
Which guy has a body?
The groom.
He has a body.
Stephen Ball.
Oh. He's puny.
You mentioned that when dogs are... No.
What? The dog?
Well, you mentioned when the dogs are doing anything besides just lying down. I mean, it's usually...
Yes, it's usually something bad. Well, these dogs you can see are chained together.
Oh.
Right? So it's sort of an unhappy, unwilling fidelity, perhaps. Yeah?
The one laying down would be like one of them in the relationship is making on to take faithful and the other one has a other guy.
Perhaps, yeah. We don't know what's going to happen with this. They're certainly bound together, not willingly. Do you guys have this?
Well, you know, it's like, you know, some sort of relationship. It's kind of like,
Yeah, the lying down dog takes submission to the face, looking away dog could be, has the wandering eye. Yeah, it's very unclear. On the other side of this painting, so we have this loveless couple. We have this vain guy, and this woman who is tearfully prepared for marriage. On the other side, we have their 2 fathers, one of whom is part of the landed gentry. So he's showing us his family tree, which sort of goes here. There's some wilted branches, bad branches, but he has sort of the blood, right? He's the aristocracy, and he has the title and the land to prove it. On the other hand, he's sort of fallen on hard times, and what we see is this guy who's a wealthy merchant, who's putting all this money on the table to pay off, basically as a dowry for his daughter. So we have kind of the marriage between gaining a title, but also getting the landed gentry wants the money, because he has the estate that is sort of falling down around him. So this is sort of the reason that these two young people on the other side are being drawn together, because one guy has the title and one woman has the money. And sort of this is why their fate is intertwined. Here we can also see through the window, this guy looking out at, these nice fancy buildings, and now there's going to be this influx of money from the wealthy merchant class to, make it great again. Yeah.
So it's almost kind of a shot back to medieval times where marriage is more of a business venture than actually.
Yes, very much. So we saw all those paintings of sort of fun and sex in France. Here is sort of the backlash to that, saying like these silly nobles, or this guy's sort of nobility, this guy's the merchant. Everybody still wants either money or the title. And here we have sort of this peaceless couple kind of subject to that. Later in the story, we have sort of the breakfast scene where we're given this couple again, and they sort of just now the morning, the woman is sort of raising her arms, sort of tired, she's waking up. They've sort of been engaged in kind of this night. She hosted a night of sort of drinking and cards and music. We see sort of playing cards scattered around, overturned furniture and things like that. She stayed in and had people over. He has gone out and he actually has sort of a woman's bonnet sticking out of his pocket, which of course the dog is sniffing at. So we have sort of this illusion that they may both be kind of cheating on each other. We don't quite know. And we have a servant with all of these unpaid bills kind of saying like, woe is me, what am I going to do? We also have, I don't know if you noticed this, but we have this weird thing on this guy's neck. Did anyone notice that dark spot? And he had it here too, at the beginning of it. Yes, what's that? Yes, it's implying that he has syphilis. So even before he gets married, he has sort of the signs of syphilis. Now it's getting much worse. So we know that he's not kind of a moral, upstanding guy. And of course, doubt is cast on this woman too, who's had sort of her fun as well. Then we have sort of the contrast here in their drawing room. What's going on there? We have all of these sort of nice religious paintings, three sort of paintings which seem to be perhaps of saints. And then this painting. Can anyone see what that painting is of? Bedroom?
I see a foot.
Maybe. We see a foot. A foot is really all we see. But it's true that we have enough to extrapolate from that. Because this painting is actually covered. It has sort of a curtain over it. And the way that this painting would sort of work in people's homes is that when you have mixed company over, you would have the painting covered. But when it's just you and the guys, and you're all hanging out, you would say like, hey, let me pull this curtain back and show you essentially like my pornographic painting. So this also is kind of alluding to like the illusion of morality with all of these nice paintings of saints. And then we have this covered painting, which of course is likely a naked woman on a bed. So that too is sort of adding up to say like, you know, what's the word? Kind of against, you know, it's building his case, Hogarth building his case against the nobility, saying they are wasteful, they don't pay their bills even, they're cheating on each other, they marry for money and land and things like this. So this is kind of the critique of the Rococo lifestyle presented by Hogarth. On the other side of that, we have people like Greuze in France who are showing us a peasant marriage, a marriage of people who are not wealthy, and it is sort of based on this quiet notion of love. It's not about money, it's not about, well, it's a little bit about money, but we see it's much more meager than what the landed gentry would have been dating. That we see a modestly dressed couple. They have their arms intertwined, but they're looking away from each other. We have sort of this girl who's getting sort of hugged by her sister. They're sad because, you know, getting married means that you're now moving on, you're moving out of the home, you're moving in with your husband. And because of sort of the love and close-knit the family dynamic that Greuze is trying to show us, you know, her parents and her sisters, her family's going to miss this bride, this woman. We also see sort of perhaps an older sister who's kind of annoyed maybe that her younger sister got married before her. She's just kind of like looking at this whole scene. The groom is, you know, paying his respects to the father, who's basically saying, you know, take my daughter and things like this. So this is sort of supposed to be a toned-down marriage scene about actual genuine emotion, as opposed to a marriage for money, or a marriage for title, or a marriage for land, and things like this. And these were also sort of at the same time kind of praised for showing kind of the morality, the upstanding morality of the peasant class. Here we go. So we have sort of that contrast between kind of the Rococo lifestyle, of course Hogarth is madly critiquing that lifestyle, and the more simple lifestyle of what Greuze is depicting, what happens in the village. So this, you can sort of see even just in the space well-to-do. They're not necessarily desperately poor. They're somewhere in between. We see that, while she's dressed moderately, the background doesn't show a lot of opulence. She's not giving us, tons of paintings on the wall or things like this. And it's just sort of about these quiet moments. So we see this shift from that crazy opulence of nobility to now an interest in quieter moments. This painting was very ironically owned by Louis XV, who would have obviously been participating in all of the partying and all the excess and things like that. But you can see sort of, anyway, we're experiencing this shift. Small moments, just in our regular life, back to genre painting. This one too, Chardin, The Boy Blowing Bubbles. Partly we can think about this shift as happening because the Enlightenment is also happening.
Oh.
An interest in, someone say an interest in the natural world. A belief that, people can be born inherently good, that they don't have original sin, and that knowledge is rationally obtained. It's not intuitive. That you can do an experiment and isolate variables and get a result, and that result can be repeated. That things aren't kind of random, but that they actually are sort of knowable. The phenomena of the world are knowable and measurable and things like that. We have people like Newton, naming gravity and saying that there's a force and it's gravity and we can measure it in these ways. We have people talking about calculus, things that we can know shapes in the world. We can get surface areas, and we can get things like this. So there's great sort of advances in science and math, and essentially building that knowledge. And partly when Chardin is showing us these small moments, he's also exhibiting an interest in that natural world. Just the phenomenon of blowing a bubble would be sort of interest to this new age of the Enlightenment. We see, of course, sort of this small child and the wonder on his face as he watches the bubble being blown. On the other hand, Chardin is showing us that he is a phenomenal artist. Because how do you represent a bubble? It's transparent. It doesn't have volume. It's one of those things that's so ephemeral that it's almost impossible to represent something like it in paint. Remember, we're still dealing with the fact that this is a two-dimensional surface, that what you're dealing with is oil paint. This is not a photograph. And Chardin is saying, I can represent a bubble, because there are rules in the world that allow me to do this, that knowledge can be learned and obtained and studied and passed on, not through kind of hearsay and wives' tales and things like that, but in a rational, understandable, knowledgeable way. And this is sort of what, question, yes?
I just wanted to point out, about two pictures, we see very clearly children at this age are still thought of as miniature adults.
Oh, yes, yeah.
It's a whole different family interaction.
Definitely, yeah. These children are supposed to be kind of well-behaved and ordered and play by the adult rules. Definitely. And here we have a child also kind of learning things from an adult about the natural world. Not because bubbles are fun, but because bubbles are these interesting natural phenomena. So yeah, that's a very good point. Paintings such as this by John Wright, where we see kind of a guy who's teaching children about the solar system, about the idea that planets revolve around the sun and not the other way, they don't revolve around Earth. New ideas. Of course, this one goes back to who's influencing? Caravaggio, exactly, yes. So here we have paintings of actual science, which is a really interesting phenomenon. So we've come from that Rococo ridiculousness to now a new interest in rational knowledge, learned knowledge. Here we see a student taking notes, what a lovely, very good student that is. We see a woman here, she's learning too, so it's not just sort of a sexist thing. We see a man in the shadows, and just sort of the delight, of course, of the intense interest of those children in learning about the natural world. will be rewarded in another world. But instead, they want to think, let's think about this world. We have made such strides in this world. We have new philosophies about how people think about Descartes, I think, therefore I am. Not I am because God made me in God's image, but I am because I'm rational and I have conscious knowledge that I exist. So these are totally new frameworks in terms of how people are thinking about themselves and their relationship to the world. And of course, Louis XVI was sympathetic to these enlightenment ideas to a certain extent. So of course, it led to Louis XVI's downfall, because if these kings didn't have a divine right based on God, well, maybe they could change the way things were. So we're getting to this point where people realize that we have revolutions in the U.S. in 1776, obviously, and in France in 1789, where people are realizing, wait, the order of things is not just because God gave a right to a king to rule over me and take all my money. So as people kind of become more aware and sort of okay with this idea that knowledge is rational and not necessarily divinely ordained, we get to see, well, we get to the French Revolution, essentially. But again, this is another just example of thinking about knowledge as a rational, understandable thing. Thinking about science as something that's rational and understandable. This is a dissection of a woman. Going back in some ways to Leonardo and the humanist knowledge of the Renaissance, where they really wanted to think about philosophy and poetry and all of these things. Not necessarily the old way of life, but this new way of life. So we get that contrast between kind of the old regime of these nobles running around wasting everyone's money, and this new idea that everyone is entitled to rational human thought. And this leads to the publishing of the world's first encyclopedia. So today, obviously, we have the entire internet and Wikipedia and all of these